Now more than ever, getting your COVID-19 vaccine is the greatest contribution you can make to returning our world to normalcy. And with more locations available to you, it's easier than ever. And not just hospitals and pharmacies either. I got mine at Six Flags. You drive right up and it's all done from the convenience of your own car.
I got my vaccine at Disneyland. 2020 was such a difficult year full of worry, and to end that worry at the happiest place on earth was truly magical. And in the end, having so many gather here to get vaccinated, I realized it really is a small world.
I didn't even know they were giving vaccines out at Raging Waters. I just went to drink beer in the parking lot and this guy came up to me and said, "Hey, you want a vaccine?" And I said, "Step back, homeboy. I don't want Bill Gates controlling my thoughts." But he showed me his YouTube channel and the science was all there. And, you know, they don't give YouTube channels out to just anybody. This was the real deal. Turns out there's vaccines all over Raging Waters. I took a plunge on Dr. Von Dark's Tunnel of Terror, and when I got out of the water, I was covered in vaccine shots. Those needles were sticking out of me like a Christmas cactus. Arthur Peterson got his vaccine at Knott's Berry Farm, and while he had no negative reaction to the vaccine itself, he is allergic to peanuts, causing him to sound like this. Whether that is an allergy to the actual nut or the Charles Schultz property, science is divided.
The closest vaccination site to me was at the Santa Monica Pier, and I had a great time. I rode the roller coaster, I got really good at skee ball, I knocked down all the milk jugs, and they gave me the biggest SpongeBob I've ever seen. And some woman was just walking around, she gave me cotton candy for free. And with the money that I had for the cotton candy, I bought a cherry lime Ricky at the Hippodrome. And to end the day, I rode the Ferris wheel. And it was such a clear day that I could see from Malibu all the way to Redondo Beach. It was a perfect day. Oh, shoot, I forgot to get the vaccine.
We're at the finish line of this, so let's all do our part.
Get the shot, so this long nightmare won't have us feeling like it's a small world.
I used to be skeptical like you. Now I'm addicted to vaccines. And you can be too.
Everything's booked up till September. How do I get an appointment?
Together. We can beat this.
Oh God, I've been volunteering at my grandparents' bingo night this whole time. Forgive me, Mima! Welcome to the 89th episode of LA Meekly, the podcast that'll have you saying, "This could have been on Zoom, Daniel."
Actually, we've been banned from Zoom.
It's not a social media platform, but they banned us.
Yeah, we were saying, hey, take this over to Skype with that with those sort of beliefs.
Yeah, with that potty mouth.
We kept trying to go into our Zoom room, but our Zoom room was padlocked.
We can't join Zoom. We can't join Zumba. We're out of all of it.
Yeah, our membership to Zubamafu has been revoked. Yeah, we can't. We gotta be in person.
You did Italian mobster hands.
That's part of the reason why we got kicked out of Zoom. We're gonna be locked out of this field recorder by next month.
We have to record on megaphones.
Megaphones, the official communication method of racists. So hey, Greg.
Oh, hi, Daniel Zaffron. How are you?
Greg Gonzalez.
How's it going?
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for asking.
This is a podcast where we only ask questions and we don't give answers. It's
still question to question and nothing gets answered. Why would you do that? I don't know. Why would you think that I did that?
Why would you ask that?
And who are you to ask that? Exactly.
Who are you? Who am I? So it's May 1st.
It is May 1st.
We are in the, what season would you call this? I like to consider it spring.
Yeah, I'm looking out right now. I'm hearing birds. They're annoying. It's spring. The plants are doing whatever plants do. It's springtime.
The plants are having babies. Birds are sprouting all over the city.
Cars are pollinating. It's beautiful. Nature's healing.
I get all my honey from the undercarriage of my car. I drink gasoline.
What I'm saying is I drink motor oil daily.
Before we get into anything, we got to welcome a few new Patreon people.
I don't believe it.
A sucker's born every day. That's what this segment is called. 6 suckers are born every month. A few of them joined like right at the beginning of the month, which is like the cutoff for when Patreon kicks in.
Yeah.
So they have to wait like a whole month before they get a postcard. And also it's right after we've recorded.
I've sent all those postcards. I'm not going to do another one. I've sent 20 postcards. I'm exhausted. Don't
know. My hands are in ice for the first 3 weeks of a month. But this month we've got a few. We have Mark Garcia with a C.
Oh, hey, Mark.
A C in both.
Oh, okay. That's good. That's really good. That's a sign of a good person. So I'm excited.
Congratulations on that, Mark. We've got Chris Bricks, which is with a K, actually. No C.
Cool.
No C for Chris.
No X either for Bricks?
There is an X, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
that could have been a CKS, but you chose X.
we'll dock points for the missing C on the Chris, but add a few for the X.
Yeah, so you're doing pretty good.
You break even.
You break even.
You're breaking even, Chris. Or should I say Chris? And then we have William Ruvalcaba.
Hey, William.
Hey,
nice
William.
To meet you.
Also with a C.
Oh, yeah, there is a C there.
No,
I checked my notes.
Actually,
There's a C there.
It's all X's. He just signed his name with one big X. And we have Rob Reinhardt, who I keep
Rob.
thinking is Rob Reiner.
Keep piling on those Princess Bride quotes. He'll get it.
Marriage? I didn't even say it right. The only one funny thing about that line, I didn't even sell it.
You're never going to be in a Rob Reiner movie.
It's inconceivable. Our final Patreon people came as a bundle. Jack and Barbara Zaffron.
Oh my God. I'm excited about every postcard I send. I made it sound like I get exhausted, but I'm still incredibly excited. I cannot wait to send your parents.
Well, you'll be happy to know that they opted out of getting postcards.
You're a kid. I'm still going to...
What do
I
they
know
want?
your address.
I already send them postcards every month because I'm a good son. And come on, your mom's on Patreon too. Leave my parents alone.
You send her postcards. I'm not worried about what you're telling my mom and my godmother. I don't worry about that.
Wait, your aunt is your godmother, isn't that?
Yeah.
We've talked about this before.
And then we talked about Rod Serling and his wife taking two separate planes so they didn't crash at that same time. And that's the conversation we had.
Let's have that one more time. They're my parents and my godparents, actually.
Welcome.
Stay away from my parents' mailbox. And these are all the new Patreon people we've got. We got a lot this month.
Welcome. I can't wait to send you guys postcards.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to keep it legible. No promises.
I won't.
Oh, yeah. Whoa,
I can't.
You don't know how. You don't know how.
I usually write all of my postcards while I'm standing on top of a moving train.
You only went to medical school that long to learn how doctors write, but to learn nothing else.
Lesson 1, writing. Oh, I could do this. Lesson 2, medicine. What? That's what I left.
When you sign your name on a prescription, you use only 2 fingers and try to be
Save
looking
the others
somewhere
for
else.
surgery.
Your surgery fingers.
Look, let's talk about something we did in the past month. This is a special edition.
It
this
is
a
a special
pandemic
edition.
because we both got vaccinated.
Yes, we did. We could be hanging out in the car right now.
At long last, we could be sitting in a car like we love to.
Doing what we love to do. Nature is healing.
We can finally be in the backseat of my car again. Disclosure here, because the city decided that library workers were a higher priority than the general public.
For Glendale, we got lumped in with education. We're like periphery of education.
Yeah, so do we. So we got the shot slightly before the general public did, which, let the record show, I thought was very gross and sleazy on the library's part too, because we're opening to the public now, but at the time we were not open to the public, and they're like, teachers and also clerks at the library should get the vaccine it's insane, but they told me to get it. And they told me to get it, and I said I don't want my brain controlled by Bill Gates or 5G. I don't want 5G in my bones.
I'm not ready to be a modem. Think of the commitment.
I'd rather get injected by Elon Musk.
Mine was at Glendale, I think Adventist, which is the hospital that I go to for most of my things. When I had my kidney stone, I went there. When I thought I broke my foot at work, I went there. They're really great at charging me crazy prices. They let us know that they were going to be opening to us, and it kind of seemed weird, but I know that they were trying to push to reopen as soon as they could. And we had a big scare in December. We had been going in at the end of last year, and then we had to close because a lot of workers, including myself, had been exposed to COVID. I don't know if they're reacting to that, but as soon as vaccines became a thing in Glendale, they're like, we need everyone to go ahead and get vaccinated. And I wasn't going to oppose that. I was like, I'd like to not kill my dad. That'd be great.
The thing that bothered me was that the whole time they were saying, like, no, it's completely safe for all of you to be cramming into the library together. And then there was a time where every single week, like 1 or 2 libraries would be shut down because there were outbreaks. And then the second the vaccine came out, they're like, it's so dangerous to be in the library. Can we go in with the teachers? Can we go in before doctors, actually?
It was gross.
I wasn't proud of it, but...
but then I can not wash every grocery. It was too tempting.
That I didn't have to shampoo my pineapples before I ate them.
My second shot was on May 1st. No, it's not May 1st.
And we're sitting in a room together right now. My second shot is actually today.
April 1st. I got it on April Fool's. That's right. I got on April Fool's, which
right.
I kept joking that they were going to give me a wacky confetti shot and be like, haha, funny, huh?
Checked your blood with silly string.
It was weird because mine was a walk-up, and it was like, oh, is this a super spreader event? Because I'm 6 feet away from the person in front of me, but the person to the left of me in line, going in the opposite, like a zigzag line, is a foot away from me. And then we're all sharing pens.
We're all sharing needles.
Yeah, and like it's weird that every once in in a while I'm like, is it fake?
Even if the vaccine's in the room, you're protected. That's why you were safe.
You're holding a piece of paper that says vaccine and it's not handwritten, it's printed, you're good. You're safe.
Just put a Band-Aid on your arm, you're fine.
The second one was really a celebratory experience because, there's a lady walking around saying like, you after you get shot, you wait for 15 minutes. And there was a lot of like, congratulations, welcome back to the world. And you're sort of like, in that moment, I was like, oh my God, you're right.
This is the first day of the rest of your life.
And then you go out to your car, you're like, oh yeah, I can't.
Time to go back home and wait for the rest of the world to catch up. I got mine at the wackiest place on earth, Six Flags Magic Mountain.
The stabbiest place on earth.
This is the first time the things going in your arm was actually good for you at Six Flags. I was really glad that I could go to a drive-through one because I didn't want to be in that situation where like I have to cram into this hospital cafeteria or whatever and get. I was really glad that it was in my car. I kept sending you pictures of the dancing guy from Six Flags.
Look who just showed up to give me the shot. Daniel does not like memes or sending GIFs as reactions. He does not like it, which means I do it all the time. But like, this is the second or third time you've done it.
They weren't GIFs. They were just images I saved from Google. It's completely different.
You have the one kid with the glasses who's like, whoa. You had another one about, you've done it so few times that I remember each time you've sent something.
It's funny when I do it. The experience that I know that they're closed now, but the experience there was pretty quick. Like we drove through, they took my temperature, which
you're pointing a gun at me right now.
They took my temperature. Stick them up, by the way. But they used one of the temperature guns, and I immediately thought like, oh, they're going to do it on my forehead. So I like leaned at them with my forehead and like, no, give me your wrist. And then they slapped cuffs on it.
I can't handcuff your head. There's no head cuffs.
You're violating your parole. You're not to be within 100 feet of Sylvester. Yeah, so I went through the whole thing. It took like an hour, maybe an hour and a half. And the shot, it's the weakest shot I've ever gotten because it doesn't really feel like anything and it's so quick. And my first reaction was, did you give me enough?
Yeah. You did it, right?
Are you sure? Yeah, it goes so quickly. Yeah. It's nothing. And then I'm allergic to, when I was a baby, I was allergic to penicillin. So they were like,
brag. I've been allergic to penicillin since I was a kid. So like, let's just respect.
Yeah, a lot of people like to get allergic to penicillin in their 20s. I turned red as a baby when I
almost died as a baby. Not to brag. I don't want to make anyone feel bad.
But they were like, "Oh, you're gonna have to wait in the 30-minute line." So I had to wait 30 minutes. Whoa. But then after 15, they're like, "He's probably fine.
We'll put you in a body bag. We'll only zip it halfway up.
Bring this with you just in case. if you die, come back." I was like, I'm sweating and my skin's turning red. You're good to go.
You look fine.
Because that's what I was worried about. Because I had to then drive all the way from Santa Clarita back. And I'm like, I'm gonna be another crazy death in the first shot. I had no reactions and I was worried, like, I don't think
I did it wrong.
I think I got the placebo. I was the control subject. And then the second one, I felt like I had a weak cold.
I felt that way for my second shot. I described it like I felt like I was a pig in a sauna. I was just so sweaty, and it was a gross sweaty because it would be hot and then it would be cold. But either way, I was like cold and wet for it.
I was just glad to feel something.
Me too. My dad and Ada got it on the same day, and I was monitoring both of them, and they're like, "We feel fine." Like my arm's sore, but no, that's it. And I was like, maybe you didn't do it right. I was so mad at both of them.
They didn't feel anything from the second one, even?
No.
Wow. You should probably stay away from those.
I should probably stop.
You should probably stop dating your dad.
No dice.
It's an easy experience that everyone should do it.
I agree.
So that was our experience. So now you don't have to be scared because us, two of the weakest people in the city, we're fine from it.
Two people who've literally reacted to every shot they've ever gotten.
Even a headshot. I got an allergic reaction to that.
We drove from La Habra to Anaheim on the streets, which is not that far at all. But we passed two coffee shops that I'm like, oh, me and Daniel are going there. We're going to be going there soon. And I was with my girlfriend. And I'm like, no, me and Daniel are going real soon.
Ada, cover your ears for a second. Me and Daniel got to go there on date night.
Yeah. Can you text Daniel for me? Because I'm driving and let him know that I plan on going to a coffee shop with him. And just him. No one else.
Yes, it will be romantic. I'm not quite ready to go to restaurants yet.
Yeah,
but
it's there. There's light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, the light is at the end of the tunnel. And oh my God, I'm back at Six Flags and it's a train coming at Wile E. Coyote. They're already saying like, all right, get ready for your third shot.
Yeah, so, I know. I asked the lady when my dad was getting his shot. Like I wanted to do like a corny, like, let's go to Staples and get them laminated. Let's get the cards vaccinated too. Let's get them laminated. And they're like, well, actually, you're going to get a booster in 6 months.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what like people keep saying, like, go to Staples and you'll get it. Like Like what they're going to write on Sharpie and it's going to wash off and now people aren't going to know I have 3 vaccinations?
We'll spray paint, clear coat.
They'll write it on Sharpie and then get that laminated again. And it's just going to be, by the time we're thick brick, it's going to be like an award for working in your office for 30 years. Yeah. All right. So that's enough of last month. Pandemic's over. So
this month we wanted to concentrate on something that's been going on. Therein lies the problem. How long has this been going on for?
Yeah, I was going to say this is something that's been going on for like
forever.
200 years because there's been a lot of news and horrible stories coming out about racism and violence against Asian Americans.
Yeah.
And we got a message on Instagram from one of our listeners who is Asian American, and she asked, like, can you know, we've talked about Chinatown and the internment camps and that sort of thing. She had a good idea of how about focusing on, instead of talking about, and then this tragedy happened, and then this horrible thing happened, how about we focus on some positive stories from Asian Americans in Los Angeles, like people, organizations, and stuff like that. So that's what we decided to do.
And I was very interested in Asian American civil rights groups. I kind of want to look at the 60s. I know like there's like famous photos of people like the Black Panthers marching and the Chicano movement, and then there's always like Asian Americans in the group as well holding up their, you know, their signs for their cause. And I was wondering what that looked like. A lot of it happened in San Francisco, but I know like some of it bled down to LA, and I wanted to know more about those.
Well, yeah, you focused more on the organization part. I picked out 2 people who were important to Los Angeles, Asian American. So yeah, that's what we're going to be, sort of an Asian Pride month.
That's good.
We're commandeering May. Actually, I think May may be Asian American.
I think it
Pacific.
is.
Who wore it best, though? This podcast that a few people listen to one time a month, or the national recognition. So I'll get it started with my first person. This is a person, Greg.
Okay.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, but hey, what about that woman?
How layered is that? Should I be digging deeper?
As with most things I say, no. No, you shouldn't.
I prefer if you didn't.
It's best to just probably fast forward while I say it and never go back. We've talked about the inception of Googie architecture.
Yes.
So this is someone who, both of my people actually, I know I definitely talked about my second person for a paragraph a long time ago.
Yes.
And I think you kind of talked about this person when we did the Googie episode.
I probably said that she didn't get enough recognition.
Yeah.
And luckily you came back and
did you say anything about being behind the curtain?
Yeah, that was my whole thing.
Oh, no. So we've talked about the inception of Googie architecture in our Googie episode, but what we didn't get into that much was someone who was just as involved in it as the others, but never quite got the credit she deserved. Helen Liu Fong.
Yes.
She was born January 14th, 1927, here in Los Angeles. Her parents were originally from China. Her dad came first to San Francisco, and once he made a little money, he sent back for his wife, and then the two moved to 1220 West 9th Street, which is James M. Wood Boulevard.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a lot of stories lately that are because those mummified babies found in the basement.
Babies. Yeah.
The place where they lived, it's now a giant UPS hub, but then it was the Sunrise Laundry, which they owned, and they lived upstairs of. The two of them, the parents, they had 5 kids who they made wash clothes and do something that I always just thought this was a caricature of what like a dork would do. They made them iron socks for people.
Oh my God, really?
Why would, what good does that do you to iron socks? Literally, who's going to see your...
If it's like dress socks and a person sitting like I just did right now, a leg over knee.
Yeah. Nice crease on your socks. But now I'm thinking of, in a lot of Asian households, you take your shoes off.
Oh,
but
maybe.
I don't know if they were doing laundry for Asian families.
Oh, okay.
I think this was, You
didn't look into that part.
No, I didn't look at who the clientele was at Sunrise Laundry from 1927. The idea of ironing socks is absurd to me.
It's so funny. It's a punishment. That's not a job. That's
you don't want to finish your vegetables? You see those socks over there? They belong to white people, and you've got to iron them.
And if there's something wrong with them, they'll let you know.
So these kids are ironing socks. Helen Liu Fong is one of these 5 kids. Her dad, however, felt that the most important thing for her was getting a good education so she could stand on her own 2 feet, as long as those feet had iron socks on them.
You sound like your socks are wrinkled. The way you walk to me right now, it feels like maybe your socks are wrinkled.
You're gliding a little when you walk. How come you're not scraping the floor with sharp-edged socks? She was always a good student, and in 1939, she won first prize in a contest for her essay on Americanism at Virgil Junior High, and the combination of that scholarliness and those iron socks sent her straight to UCLA, 1943, and then then she went to Berkeley, where she graduated in 1949 with a degree in city planning. And this time, this was an extremely rare accomplishment because not only was she a woman, she was an Asian American woman, which those types of people didn't go to UCLA and Berkeley.
In that era.
In that era.
Yeah.
And now, as long as I have my way. Unfortunately, when she graduated, she was not able to get a job, not only because she was a woman, but because she was an Asian woman.
Right.
So she got her degree, but end of the line for you.
Yeah, thank you for giving us your money.
Yeah. But luckily, one man took a chance on her and hired her to work for him. This was Eugene Choi, who was an architect who designed mostly modernist houses, but also the Chinese Consolidated Benevolent Association in Chinatown.
Oh, yeah?
Which I think we talked about in the
That sounds familiar, yeah.
Oh, you're not a member? You're not benevolent?
Oh, you don't know about that? Oh, you're malevolent. Oh, yeah. That's a different church.
Oh, I joined the wrong organization. It's next door, the Chinese Consolidated Malevolent Association. It's all the evil twins of all of the people at the benevolent
church.
So he designed that and the Cathay Bank, which is also in Chinatown.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so he designed that.
That's a beautiful building, too.
That's a historic.
Yeah, I believe I talked about that in the Chinatown episode. Thank you very much.
Actually, we're talking about Cathay Bank, the cartoon character, and it's sweating a lot and it wants chocolate. It's next door also. It's a whole twin thing. But Choi himself had been the first Chinese American to join the American Institute of Architects in California. So he sympathized as a fellow trailblazer. He sympathized with Helen's struggle in that regard, but she was still a woman. So he didn't hire her as an architect, but instead she was his secretary.
Okay.
Here she learned how to do contracts, process payments, and get things organized. But in 1951, he had to lay her off, and now she was back to trying to find a job, which was hard enough the first time. But this was the 50s, and finding a job worked in cartoonish ways, and she literally walked down the hall of the same building that Choi had his office in and into the office of our old pals May and Davis, who had been in that building since 1947. They welcomed Helen in, again, not as a full-on architect, but this time she was a junior draftsman.
Okay.
Couldn't even call her a draftswoman. She joined at just the moment when they were working on the Clock restaurant in Westchester, which is considered to be their first Googie project. Okay. So she was there at the beginning for the creation of Googie.
Crazy.
Yeah, just like walking into a random office. Yeah, she was walking by and they stuck their head out the door. Is anyone here looking for a job?
Imagine like they had a drawing on the board of the place and it has like a straight roof and they're like, what needs? And then she comes and puts like an angle on it.
She erases part of it.
Yeah, and puts an angle and they're like, oh my God, a whole wall that's made of glass, like a window? Yes.
So along for the whole Googie adventure that we talked about before was Helen Liu Fong, and she was basically the third phantom head of May and Davis's work defining the Googie style.
Yeah, it should be 3 names.
It really should have been in 3 names, but I mean, we've seen Mad Men. That's not going to, they're not going to put a feminine sounding last name on, you hear the last name Fong, you know that's a woman. They're not going to put that on the side of a building, which they didn't even have. They were in So her first big contribution here for May and Davis was at the Holiday Bowl in Crenshaw. In particular, their cocktail lounge was her doing.
Oh, yeah?
The place was called Sake Ba, and since the owners of the place were Japanese and a lot of the people in the area at the time were also Japanese, she designed it to reflect Japanese culture with an early hint of trademarks of Googie. There was a ceiling designed in Japanese woodwork, but also this gold-colored map of, like 3D kind of gold-colored map of Japan. The bowling alley was demolished in 2003, but the cocktail bar was so beloved by the community that it was made a historic cultural landmark, but all that was saved of it was the facade that is now the outside of a Starbucks.
Oh my God.
But at least the facade's still there, which was Helen Liu Fong's doing.
That's crazy how like protections work, where they're like...
Yeah, the sinks can stay. Everything else
has to go.
But in her work on this cocktail bar, it was a hint at what would be her great contribution, which was basically being the person who created not the exterior look of Googie, but the interior look of Googie.
Which is just as important.
Maybe even more important. So May and Davis were designing the building, although we'll get into that later, but the inside of these places was basically Helen Liu Fong. Meaning that feeling of being in a Googie diner, which I'll give examples of later, was designed and created by Helen Liu Fong.
That's crazy.
To start, she was the one to push for the front of places being big giant windows.
Yeah.
Because one, it connected the people inside to the street outside during the car culture of the 50s, which was huge, so nobody would ever be too far from staring at their car.
Yeah.
And two, it connected people with being able to eat inside but also kind of be outside, which was another big thing because this was fair weather Los Angeles.
Right.
And nobody wanted to be too far from being able to look at how nice the weather was outside. She was the one sort of like, we should do windows.
Yeah. I think we talked about it in our Googie episode about how that was like a motif motif of that thing. But hearing it explained, I'm like, oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
That is absolutely a
Yeah,
perfect
and
idea.
that's why it was done here. Like, people don't... In New York City, you don't want to have a giant floor-to-ceiling glass window and see rats running by while you're eating. Like,
that is very true.
in Los Angeles, like, you want to look outside and...
All the rats are blonde, yeah.
Yeah. They're carrying little surfboards. That rat is like a New York 6, but that rat here is like a LA 10. And I mean like 10 kids that it has on its back.
I mean, like, it's pounds.
In New York, the rating system is weight, but in here it's hotness for rats. Rats are so hot. So her quest to connect the outside to the inside also manifested in putting tropical gardens in front of a lot of these places and then having those same types of plants inside to further the connection and smooth the transition between inside and outside. That's why there's a lot of almost like tropical feel in a lot of googie places. It's, she wanted that.
You're like blowing my mind in small explosions. But like, I always thought
small
that was
controlled detonations.
I always thought that was like a weird sort of like Polynesian thing. But to hear that explanation, that's much better.
It was just a way to make people feel like they were inside but outside. She would have done great in coronavirus
She would have, yeah. I feel like I went inside of that Denny's today.
Oh, I did? And I refused to put a mask on? That wasn't me. I was in a fugue state. So then once you were inside of these places, she hated things being the color green or blue, which she felt was sad. She thought those two colors were sad. She said, you've been in places where they had powder blue booths, right? Need I say more? To her, those were just depressing interiors.
In sign painting, we were taught to never do lettering for a restaurant in blue because blue is the one color that psychologically denotes decay.
Really?
Yeah.
I guess that's why I identify with Picasso's blue period. Yeah, I mean, that, like McDonald's is red and yellow.
Yeah.
That's
like browns or yellows or reds.
That's weird. I don't think I've eaten anything blue other than that milk I had on the moisture farm. There's not much blue food.
Yeah, not a lot of blue food, but also like labeling for food, especially meat. It's like you never see a barbecue place with
love
like
blue meat. Oh man.
My favorite meat is blue meat.
She would have hated Eiffel 5. She's blue, and if it was also green, she also would die. So instead of blue and green, she was all about yellows and whites, and most importantly, red, because it was an easy color to see from your car on the road, and it would catch your eye and draw you in. Just like how cops always spot red cars, hungry cops always spot red restaurants. And even beyond that, she was involved in the restaurants she was working on in designing, here we go, the booths, the chairs, the counters, the bar stools, the lighting, the doorknobs, the silverware, the glaze on the dishes, and the look of the menu. Like, she was giving input and having a say on all
Architects
of that.
are involved with the look of the menu?
I had no idea, but I guess
God.
when you got Arme and Davis involved, like, you're getting the whole package.
Just do the whole thing.
They'll cook the food for you.
They'll hire all the crew.
This person's nose doesn't have the right hook on it.
Yeah, it's angled weird. You can't work here. It doesn't complement the ceiling.
You're going to work here with eyebrows like that and tiling on the floor like that. She was picking out employee uniforms.
Really?
Like, she was that involved. She would also hire artists to make art specifically for that place. So you really were like, they were doing it for you.
Yeah.
Like, they were going to make your place look good. She also made sure the layouts were curvy in a way that would guide the guests and employees to where they were supposed to go.
That's great. Corky's didn't have like a curved. Something does though, but I don't remember what.
I feel like Pans. Hey, listen to this.
Let's get there when we get there.
Listen to this completely spontaneously. Some of the notable places she worked on were some of the Denny's, Bob's Big Boy, Johnny's Coffee Shop, the one that's now just Bernie's Coffee Shop and Socialism Store.
Socialist headquarters.
She worked on the first Norms, and of course, our beloved, not the filming location of Pulp Fiction, Pans. She was responsible for the inside of Pans. Right before Pans was set to open, she gave it a walkthrough, and she didn't like the white tiles behind the counter, so she ran over to them and took out some of her red nail polish and covered them in red nail polish, and that nail polish stayed on them for 30 years.
Oh my God.
Until they did a renovation in, I guess, the 90s, which I'm more impressed with the nail polish, to be honest. How did it not chip?
So what exactly does that mean? Does she went to every tile and like add a dash of red?
I think she did a few tiles. She colored in a few tiles because it was too white. She like every 4 tiles maybe.
Like a Jackson Pollock or something.
Yeah, she put it in her mouth. And I wish I could have seen that, but an insane level of dedication and obsession also.
Yeah.
She always got credit for her interior work at Arme and Davis, but in reality she seemed to be doing a lot of the other work there that she didn't get credit for, like being a client liaison, watching over payroll, making sure people got paid, and even helping out in some of the overall designs. She was described by people who worked there as was the guiding light that kept the firm going. Like, she was the heart of R. May and Davis. She only allowed classical music to be played in the office, and one guy was whistling one time, and she came up behind him and put her hand on his shoulder and said, "We don't whistle while we work here." Which
I guess when you are responsible for so much of a restaurant's success, I feel like that
coming from anywhere else, it's the saddest thing I've ever heard. So she designed a few homes independently and a few things in Indianapolis, Toronto, Dearborn, and Buffalo, but for the most part, she only designed in LA, and the only firm she ever worked for was R. May and Davis. In 1964, they made her an associate at the firm, and really she was right up there side by side with R. May and Davis, overseeing everything. And like we said, it should have been called R. May and Davis and Fong, but as good as those two were to her and as involved as she was allowed to be, she never became a licensed architect because of her gender and her race. So she was never a full-on architect. She had a great career, but who knows what ceiling she could have reached. Literally.
Who knows what angled ceiling she could have reached.
What cantilevered ceiling. Had she been allowed to move up to the next level.
That's a shame.
It is a shame. She retired in the late 70s, but she still did some consulting with them for decades after that until she died April 17th, 2005 in Glendora of cancer. That's a sad way to end this story, but there's not really much else to say other than the next time I'm stacking creamer cups at a diner waiting for my chicken fried steak and staring at the cars driving by, I'll be thinking of you, Helen Liu Fong, and also my chicken fried steak.
I love when it's such a hard thing to pull off, and it can be so annoying when you're not the person, but I really respect a singular vision. You know what I mean? Like, I know it just takes more than just one person, obviously, but
not with her.
She did everything. But I think that's incredible.
I couldn't believe what I was reading, that she was checking out the glaze on the dishes, but hey, let her do it. Try and stop her. I'm going to be talking about two things. I'll just get into it because I wrote all my... Well, actually, knowing the name of what you're about to be talking about, three things. A three-headed thing, maybe.
I think that Okay, we'll get into it. I want to focus my second on what came out of the UCLA Asian American Study Program.
A three-headed thing?
A three-headed dog. Cerebus. Okay, I'm going to talk about two things. The two main things being the publication Gidra.
King Gidra.
A little bit about the department at UCLA and the term Asian American, in quotes. In 1969, on campus at UCLA, 5 students, Mike Morazzi, Denora Gill, Laura Ho, Colin Watanabe, and Tracy Okita, founded a monthly newspaper titled Gidra, kinda named after a Godzilla monster.
How could it be kinda named after this King Kong magazine, not that King Kong
magazine? What you're thinking of and what Tracy, who came up with the name, was thinking of was King Ghidorah.
It's the same thing. I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Okay, if you've heard it both ways...
I've heard the monster pronounced both ways. I don't know about the magazine, but I've heard the monster pronounced both ways.
Then at least they had that going for them, because I was listening to an interview, but someone's like, she misremembered the name of Ghidorah, and that's why it's called Gidra.
I always pronounced it Gidra, but then I saw not the most recent Godzilla movie, but the one before that, and they kept calling it Gidra or Ghidorah.
Oh, okay. And then maybe it'll
fly. Always be Gidra to me.
Why haven't you seen Kong vs. Godzilla? It's incredible.
How am I going to see? What, am I going to pay to see a movie?
It's on HBO Max. I saw it for free.
I don't have HBO Max. What do you think? What do you think? I'm Jimmy Fallon, the richest man in the world, which is a really cool name for a magazine.
Yeah, it is. I know. I wanted to steal it. I'm like, oh, can I steal it? I can call something.
Maybe Son of Godzilla magazine, or...
We're going to come up with a new podcast. It's called Mecha Godzilla. Gidra, the publication that is, was a radically progressive political publication that was created in the early days of Asian American activism. That term, Asian American, alone requires a bit of a detour, so let's take it.
The first head of Gidra.
Although we're talking about 2 UCLA alumnus or alumni, they were not students nor in Los Angeles for this, so I felt weird dedicating a whole segment to their political awakening in Berkeley, which is not in Los Angeles.
Which is the place to go for a political awakening.
So I couldn't dedicate a whole segment to Emma G. and Yuji Choi, founders of the Asian American Political Alliance in Berkeley, California. But that was just a year before Gidra starts, 1968, and the term, like I keep saying, the term itself, Asian American. The term did not exist as an umbrella term before 1968. You identified as your particular Asian subgroup, which is like Chinese, Filipino, Japanese, Korean, Thai, so on and so on. Or as other people refer to you, Oriental, which white America seems to think is appropriate and respectful, and it's kind of not.
Hang on.
Slow down now.
Wait a minute.
As Richard Aoki put it, Oriental was a rug that everyone steps on. So we ain't no Orientals. We're Asian American. It was like a term of pride. Some of us might take for granted the term Asian American, not realizing.
Yeah, it's crazy to think of like someone had to come up with that.
Yeah, and it's like not even that old. I took for granted that it was, that's what you respectfully call somebody. It wasn't like a political coinage that people fought to get recognized by. They wanted to unify all the Asian ethnic subgroups together in one umbrella term, and the Asian American Political Alliance, or APA, as I'll call them.
Did you say GAPA? I forget what his subtitle is. And he also doesn't fight Godzilla, but he is in the Godzilla universe.
Thank you.
Yeah. The trichlorian monster. It's something like that.
I'm not Kevin Smith, and you don't have to call Kevin Smith.
Oh, man.
You have to call your lifeline.
Not that one. Yeah.
Also not that
Could
one.
I phone a friend? What if instead of because I would never phone a friend, what if it's just text a friend? Like you're in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire and it's the $1 million question and you use text a friend, but you have to wait like 30 minutes for them to respond and everyone's just waiting for you to answer the question.
The bubble keeps popping up that they're writing and then disappearing. Maybe he's busy. Do you want to call him? No, we don't call each other.
We don't have that sort of relationship.
So these two people created hAAPI, as I'll be calling it. And it's very much in line with the African American civil rights movement, the Black Panther movement, and the Chicano movement. Like it's in that league of like the civil rights movements of the 60s.
And gay rights. Because I was looking back on the like Black Cat stuff and it was gay groups, black groups, Chicano, like Latino groups, and I believe also Asian groups were all like, let's all just take this moment and stand up together all across the city.
And that's what's kind of wild about that era is that there was such unity that it could be like, I mean, like it happened like
simpler
last year.
times.
Yeah, simpler times. Last year, I guess that happened too, where everyone was just like, our group is against the cops too. And
Yeah. The witches stand against the witches of Eastwick stand against cops.
So at the forefront of the hAAPI were Emma G and Yuji Ichioaika, two UCLA grad students. Emma G I couldn't find too much about, sadly, because a lot of times she's listed as either the girlfriend or later wife of Yuji. And the fact that I couldn't find out more really sucks, but she's listed at some point as a Chinese American activist, and that's secured in her formation of hAAPI. Yuji, a man of Japanese descent, was born in San Francisco, and at the age of 6 was interned along with his family, along with the rest of the Japanese citizens in his country in a camp during the Pacific part of the war. The Ichioaika family were housed at the Topaz internment camp in Utah, which is like being locked in a prison within a bigger prison.
The prison of Utah.
After the war, the family came back to nothing. His father, who was 62, had to start over as a day laborer. His sister worked as a live-in maid to get herself through UC Berkeley. She told him she was going to become a, quote, super Jap, so superior that nobody, least of all a white person, would say that she was inferior.
Was that her take on the Lenny Bruce character?
The Lenny Bruce super Jew, yeah, that's her. She was so inspired by something that happened much later.
What she meant was she wants to be a very political, quote-unquote comedian, not usually that funny, but just kind of, was influential.
Funny at a very early point and then became obsessed with litigation. Great side character in Maisel, though. She went on to earn her biochemistry degree in 3 years. In his
God.
Yeah.
That right there. She's earned her title.
She's earned her title well. In his teens, Yuji found work with the Mexican migrant farm workers planting 800 acres of celery in Lodi. There he saw the injustices and discriminations the migrant farmers faced. And as soon as he turned 18, Yuji joined the army and was a private in Germany. And while a soldier, he saw a white man refusing to take orders from a black second lieutenant. After the war, he attends UCLA and he graduates in 1962. After that, he moved to New York City to attend Columbia University to study Chinese history, but left the program not long after starting. But it's at Columbia where he meets Emma G. In 1966, he travels to Japan for the first time and is inspired to study Japanese as a language and pursue research on the Japanese immigrant experience in the U.S. That leads him to the MA program in Japanese history at UC Berkeley, which he completed in 1968, which is the year we're going to be talking about.
The year of the Gidra.
The Bay Area in the late 60s was the place to be if you wanted to be awakened by activism, and him and Emma G did. At 33,
do we need to do another 60s recap right now?
Yeah, we'll do a 60s recap.
Hair is on the big screen and on your body.
We start playing the opening guitar riff of Smile on Your Brother. Hippies walk down the street, do a peace sign. Again, the lady at Kent State is crying over the dead body. Helicopters going into Vietnam.
The Dick Van Dyke Show is coming to an end.
An era closes.
The Munsters are just getting started.
Charade is the biggest thing to ever happen.
This is my alternate side, like the completely unpoliticized side of the 60s that I'm aware of. The Catskills are booming.
Everyone's playing Twister.
Beaches are packed with white people.
Little Gidgets out there trying to surf with the boys.
The endless summer just won't end.
And that's the 60s. At 33, he and Emma G were full-fledged activists. The two had gone through the roster of the Peace and Freedom Party.
That's my favorite Janis Joplin song. Is that Janis Joplin?
That's Janis Joplin.
Okay, good. I didn't want to sound like an idiot.
The two had gone through the roster of the Peace and Freedom Party and located all the Asian American names, called them, and organized hAAPI as the first Pan-Asian American political group. Another really early member of the group was Vicky Wong, a 17-year-old first-year student at UC Berkeley. She got interviewed, but she was saying, like, the peace movement was led by whites, Wong said. And then I tried to join the Black Panther Party in Oakland, and then they told me you can't because you're not black. So they said you should try to form your own group, and I thought, well, what is my group?
Hang on, I've never thought about that. I guess it makes sense, but if I wanted to join the Black Panther Party, I would be denied.
Yeah, you can like support them.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, oh yeah, that makes total sense.
It makes sense, but I never thought about like, I can't be a Black Panther.
You sound so sad.
It's a
when
little
I came out.
disappointing. It's a little sad.
It's a little bit sad. That's fine. There's a lot of stuff that the Black Panthers couldn't do.
Are there any like white groups I could join?
Oh, that's a shame. They're all in Orange County or Palmdale. It's a shame.
Complaining. How come there's no white groups I can join? There's no groups just for white people.
And so his political awakening begins.
In the wrong direction.
In the complete wrong direction. So they told her, like, you have to form your own group. And she thought, like, well, what is my group? They're in that very first session at Emma and Eugene's apartment on Hearst Avenue in Berkeley. There's now a sign there at a plaque. They, along with Vicky and a handful of other members, coined the term Asian American. It was like someone remembers being there.
Yeah.
And they were like, hey, we should come up with this way to call all of Asians.
That's also, it's kind of crazy because, like, Asia is huge.
Yeah, it's the biggest continent.
Hey,
no, it's not the biggest continent. It's the biggest country.
Geography? Yeah, Asia's the biggest country.
Yeah, no, it's the biggest continent. I'm like trying to go through geography lessons in my head.
Let me go get my tape measure. It's crazy that it is all Korean rights is tied up with Cambodian rights.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy that it's all one thing. I don't know what I'm trying to say. It's just crazy to think about.
With all of the internal struggles within different countries, that there's still a term to bind everybody.
I wonder if that's a positive thing or a bad thing.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, too, because it must be kind of nice to have an umbrella term, but don't you want to be celebrating your particular descent?
I don't know.
I have no idea.
Two people who aren't Asian at all, we don't know.
Let's pontificate on this. Let's really draw it out.
Just like we said earlier, we ask questions. We don't ask answers.
We ask answers. But she was saying, like, Vicky was saying, I went in Oriental and came out Asian American. That's like how powerful this meeting in this little apartment was. Not a large, it wasn't like a large committee or a focus group. They didn't like go through different names. It was like 6 college students in an apartment wanted something to change and were committed to following through. You know?
First thought, best thought.
First thought, best thought. Their biggest moment is during the Third World Liberation Front strikes from November of 1968 to March of 1969, which was the longest student strike in U.S. history. It was Asian American, African American, Chicano, Native American students all clashed with administrators and police to establish what they called Third World College, what we now know as Ethnic Studies, the Ethnic Studies Department, where curriculum would be designed for and taught by people of color.
Hang on, so you're telling me I can't teach a class? My dreams are getting crushed left and right.
You're going to say that I can't teach a Native American literature course? How come? I read Sherman Alexie. How come? They also protested to increase the number of students and faculty of color at the schools. A second strike took place at UC Berkeley from January to March 1969, and at San Francisco State, APA, the Intercollegiate Chinese for Social Action Group, and the Filipino-American Collegiate Endeavor formed the Asian contingent of the student-led strike there. So they were very active in these protests for the Third World Liberation Front. These strikes were huge because, first of all, they were highly publicized, so a lot of people in this country saw them, and the images of Asian Americans protesting loudly and proudly challenged the idea of popular depictions of like the quiet, subservient Asian American. Like that, this isn't the people that you're seeing on TV who are like protesting hard.
Which I never really understood that stereotype of the because like I think my high school might have been majority Korean. At the very least, most of my friends were Asian. And I never understood the quiet, subservient thing. Nobody I knew was like that.
Quiet people are quiet and loud people are loud.
Yeah, if anything, I was the quiet, subservient one.
It's weird that was a thing. I guess like depictions in media certainly serve that idea. But it really is like, it must have been like white America didn't know any Asian American people other than like people who owned businesses they went to. So they didn't really know
they didn't
them.
know. Yeah, exactly.
But like, so if you didn't know any Asian people and you only knew it from the people who own the businesses you sometimes went to and the depictions in TV and movies, like, you're going to walk away thinking, oh, Asian people are like that. Yeah.
It's almost like appropriate representation in media matters.
It's strange how people are fighting that and they're calling stuff gratuitously diverse and you think you're my friend?
Disney and their obsessive wokeness.
It's almost like they're trying to fight something that the 20th century like really pounded
Disney
into. Disney fully helped for all of their existence up to maybe recently and even also kind of recently. APA as a group ends in 1969, which is weird. They were only like I think for 2 years, but like their movement really like moved forward. The activism they pushed for was growing. Yuji was then recruited as an instructor at UCLA of the first Asian American Studies course there, which he took part in establishing the Asian American Studies Center there. Like he and a group of others built that. I looked up the name. I forgot what it was, but the word Oriental was thrown in there. I'm like, that's probably why they needed to change that. In 1972, Eugene and Emma moved to Southern California permanent, where he continued teaching and researching. Emma G became a scholar of Asian American women's history as well as a writer and a labor activist. So these two were prominent in that movement. So with the term Asian American out there demanding all kinds of respect and the Asian American activism and civil rights movement churning out change, it seemed like a good time to start a radical student-run newspaper. 1969, okay, War Across the USA. We all know the Stooges song. It was a good time for Gidra. Why Gidra?
It's always a good time for
Gidra. According to Gidra, it's always a good time for Gidra. Well, I wrote all this before you challenged me, so I'm just going to read it anyways. Well, Gidra took its name from the villain and sometimes hero from sometimes hero,
the
most
conniving villain of the Godzilla movies.
It's so funny because I watched a thing on. I want to know more about the monster. I always want to know more about the monsters. I want to know more about King Ghidorah. It's so funny because sometimes he's a bad guy, sometimes he's a good guy, depending on Godzilla's mood. I'm like, does all the monsters' life just revolve around what Godzilla's up to?
How he feels that day? Pretty much. I mean, Mothra sometimes is bad, and sometimes it's his wife. But hey, that's marriage.
We have Frankenstein, where sometimes he's a good guy and sometimes he's a bad guy. They have a giant radioactive monster. We have a bunch of dead bodies.
There could be something worse than Gidra out there, and then suddenly Gidra's a good guy.
You think you're looking at the top of the totem pole, but it just goes higher and higher. You're like, well, who was it? So everyone on the bottom is fighting the thing on top.
It's
now.
King Totem Pole.
There should be a monster made up of all the faces of the other monsters. So villain, sometimes hero, Gidra from Godzilla, King Ghidorah. I would like to take a moment of silence for our fan and friend Kevin Smith to not scream. Not that one. I just have to give him a minute if he's still listening. Just go ahead and scream everything he knows about Godzilla, because I know that as soon as he hears this, he'll be.
It'll take more than a minute.
Here's another thing.
And one time, he crashed into the North Pole. That's my impression of Kevin Smith, who sounds nothing like that.
It's all there, though.
It's his essence, certainly.
For all of us regular people out there, I wish I knew more about Godzilla lore. I don't. I watched the 2-hour-long, here's everything you need to know about Godzilla, and I walked away knowing less.
That's the thing with Godzilla. The more you learn, the less you know. The more you watch, the stupider you are.
King Ghidorah is a 3-headed winged monster, and although King Ghidorah is often played as a baddie, the people running Gidra saw him as an entity resisting oppressive system that sought to eradicate his existence.
You could say that about all of the
you really could.
Kaijus, which is Lenny Bruce's other character, Super Jew and Kaiju.
In that same vein, Gidra saw themselves, Asian American youth in the middle of a changing nation, as a mighty beast ready to take on a society that oppressed them. Well, why isn't it called Ghidorah instead of Gidra? Well, in a classic Greg move, the person, Tracy Okita, I believe, pitched the name Gidra, misremembering the name of the monster, and they meant Ghidorah. But after they found out, they were just happy it wasn't Ghidorah, because at least Gidra was original. You're telling me it's not, but
I swear to God, I've always pronounced it Gidra, and then only recently have I heard it pronounced Ghidorah.
We should watch a bunch of Godzilla movies and look into it.
Let's watch Destroy All Monsters and the one that came out before Godzilla vs. King Kong.
King of the Monsters.
King Kong, King of the Monsters.
Godzilla the Monsters. I've only seen a handful of Godzilla movies, but when other monsters are involved, he always seems like the angry dad, just go to bed. Just go to bed. And they're like, no! And they're just destroying and blowing fire everywhere or laser beams, and he's just go to bed. Go to bed. And then as soon as everyone's destroyed, he's like, I'm going to go back into the ocean. And slowly,
I gotta get some rest.
Get some rest. And just slowly
I'm
walks
4,000 years too old for this.
They said, don't have kids when you're 3,900 years old. And I said, what do they know? And now here I am. As we already stated, the Asian American Studies Center at UCLA was brand new, and it was a huge accomplishment. Gidra starts when its core members, I'll name them Mike, Denora, Laura, Colin, and Tracy, approached UCLA administration about starting an Asian American community newspaper for the campus to be a collection of voices for this new department. They felt that there was an audience who wanted to read the perspective of Asian American activists. UCLA said no thanks, but Gidra would not be stopped. The core 5
Don't we know it?
That's at least 5 movies where you can't stop Gidra. The core 5 each threw in $100 each to produce their own indie publication. Their first issue was published in April of 1969. It featured articles, a statement of intent, illustrations, a comic strip, and poetry. Issue number 1 was, I think, 4 pages, and they stated this about Gidra. Trust is not always pretty, not in this world. We try hard to keep from hearing about feelings, concerns, and the problems of fellow human beings when it disturbs us, but it makes us feel uneasy. And too often it is position and power that determine who is heard. This is why Gidra was created. Gidra is dedicated to truth, the honest expression of feeling or opinion.
This is like when Gidra is running for president.
Yeah. He's got a little suit on.
and then subtitles at the bottom.
He's using the Empire State Building as a podium. He's got his hands resting on top of it.
Gidra is committed to healthcare for all. Gidra will forgive your student loan debt. Vote King Gidra.
No more American jets.
We will slash the budget on heat-guided missiles. No more nuclear research.
The honest expression of feeling or opinion, be it profound or profane, innocuous or insulting, from wretched or well-off, that is Gidra. Gidra is truth.
I saw some of their covers. The covers are really cool.
Oh, yeah, they're insane. They're so good.
Yeah,
they get really good artists. A lot of it looked like Raymond Pettibon drawings, but I never found out if it was him or not. The guy who drew like a lot of punk stuff. They had a page that with the words in capital letters screaming to be read aloud, "Yellow Power," which I don't feel comfortable saying, but it was written in Gidra, so I have to say. A little
louder, Greg? A little louder?
Yellow Power is a call. This is in the paper. Yellow Power is a call for Asian Americans to end the silence that has condemned us to suffer in this racist society. So right off the bat, Gidra was bold. While on campus, Gidra focused itself on Asian American movement and helped define the terms of what that meant, as well as chronicling the fight for ethnic studies on college campuses and the rise of activism in Asian American communities. Gidra at some point moves off the UCLA campus and into the offices in the Crenshaw district, 3108 Jefferson Boulevard, where Jefferson meets 11th. Like, it's nothing now except for like an empty strip mall, but it used to be like law offices, and in the middle of that was Gidra. When Gidra moves, the content grows.
It's just stuck in my head now.
You have to stop. You have to try to stop.
But
every time I look up,
whenever
you're
you're mentioning Gidra, I imagine Gidra in the middle of an office building now.
With a little like newsboy cap on, typing furiously. Mothra comes in.
He's got
I need that article.
A press pass.
Yeah, you got a press pass on.
Mothra.
He needs that article stat. You said you'd be done by now.
Manta's breathing down my throat. I gotta get this published. We go to print in 2 hours.
When Gidra moves, the content grows with it. And I think when they were at UCLA, the paper was concerned with the movement on a smaller scale, like centered around activism in colleges and smaller communities. But when they move, Gidra begins discussing the international anti-imperialist movement, linking the Vietnam War to the A-bomb dropping on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. They have a regular updated column on dealing with the Vietnam draft. They discuss other movements in Asia. They continue covering other third world, quote unquote, civil rights groups. Their graphic design, their art, and their poetry sections get really good. As you were saying, the cover art is like amazing. Mm-hmm. They run a series of articles on cooking, making clothes, and fixing toilets.
Fixing toilets?
Like I guess it's like home repair for college.
I thought it was like a regular, and here's the monthly segment on how to fix your toilet.
Hey, I'd read it.
I have
a toilet that leaks at the bottom. I'd love it.
I have a toilet that hasn't flushed in years.
More of a kind of like a stew now. Keep in mind that they are not making money from this. They tried to sell it for a quarter early on, but usually just ended up giving it away because they felt like people needed to read this. The staff, which had expanded significantly and through its run would bring in about 100 volunteers, put in 50 to 60-hour work weeks working on Gidra while they were at their day jobs. And a schedule like that for no money, maybe Gidra should have become a podcast. You like that?
Did they consider Patreon?
You get $5 a month from your friends and family.
Mostly family.
Gidra discussed things like the Little Tokyo redevelopment and how older Japanese residents were being pushed out of the area for big businesses and buildings to move in. And reading that, I'm like, there are no homes in Little Tokyo, are there? There's like apartment complexes where people live. But there's not like a home.
I mean, there's not homes downtown, really.
I guess not. Well, there was Bunker Hill. I'm wondering if at some point there were.
There haven't been homes downtown in like 70 years.
Very true. But that, I guess I'm stuck on the idea of like Bunker Hill, but that's pretty early. I don't know. Like, I kind of want to know more about what Little Tokyo looked like before big businesses moved in.
Well, we talked about that in the Central Avenue one when it became Bronzeville. And so a little bit about that.
I just wanted to know more about it.
Well, too bad.
Well, what is this, a podcast about history? Why didn't you look into it already? Gidra ran a series about what was unfolding there kind of later in their years. They ran a story about young people dealing with their cultural identity, generational gaps. Still, though, most impressingly about Gidra was how they dealt with talking about the Japanese incarceration during World War II, mainly that they were even talking about it. A majority of Gidra staff were Japanese Americans or of Japanese descent, and many had personal stories to tell about that traumatic experience at a time when Americans were hoping it would just slip away with time. Many older Japanese people shied away from talking about it, and while Americans saw Japanese and Japanese Americans and Asian Americans as the model minority, which is incredibly hurtful and dumb. Yeah. Just like, be like them. There weren't a lot of voices or venues to talk about what happened to Japanese people in the 40s, but there was Gidra, a prime venue to tell history from a different perspective. Gidra was a blend of the past, the present, and the future of Asian American concerns. But Gidra was not long for this world.
You can't say things like this to me and not expect me to picture every Godzilla movie.
It goes black and white and it zooms in on his face. But Gidra was not long for this world.
It suddenly turns into like a Kurosawa movie, but it's Gidra.
For their 5th anniversary issue in 1974, they announced that they would take a hiatus. I love this in quotes. At least 3 months, probably longer. possibly forever. There were many reasons why. There was no money making in this whole thing. Fewer volunteers were coming in, and it was listed, one of the reasons was declining morale. I don't know more about that. I guess because the 70s hit, and you learned that the 60s didn't work, and you're like, we should probably just do something else. Because it turns out the cops in the military and the American government don't care that we're protesting everything.
Let's go listen to Led Zeppelin.
Let's go listen to Led Zeppelin, get really high, and then get surprised when the Manson family thing happens. You know, that's in 1969.
It already happened.
It already happened.
But we're so high, it comes to us. We didn't hear about it till 1974. We heard, but it didn't sink in till.
I didn't really get what that meant. It's so funny. My 60s montage idea is but my 70s montage is just clips from Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah, I was thinking it's Leatherface with a chainsaw at the end. That's the whole montage.
It's the opening of that corpse on a stick, and they're just I don't know. So its press run and completion was 4,000, and it had 900 to 1,300 subscribers by the end. Many of its staffers went on to become active in the anti-eviction struggles in the mid to late 70s as part of the Little Tokyo Anti-Eviction Task Force and Little Tokyo's People's Rights Organization. So they even when the publication was done, they continued their activism. It wasn't just dead with the publication of a certain name.
Which one?
And what's the name of the publication? 20 years later, in 1989, a group of the original Gidra members and New Blood put out a 20th anniversary issue, and 10 years after that, 1999, another 5 issues of Gidra were released by another group. Thanks to Mike Morassi, all the issues were saved, digitized, and are now online for free at densho.org, DENSHO.org. And on its 45th anniversary, from its original last run issue, but that's 2019, a new issue of Gidra was released, looking back on its publication's history in the 50 years of Asian American activism. Gidra is a perfect manifestation of cultural change and raw, new, exciting activism. It's a thing born out of the civil rights zeitgeist, which is, I didn't realize when I was typing it would be really hard to say.
The Asian civil rights zeitgeist.
Nailed it. Got it the first time out. And Asian Americans today who feel like the whole world is discriminating them can flip through Gidra and see the horrifying facts that this isn't new, which is awful, but maybe a beacon of hope that you aren't alone. This is other generations going through their own stuff, got through by actively making themselves heard and finding community. So hopefully Gidra could be there for somebody.
It almost feels like Gidra should be like a golem type of character protecting Asian Americans, but then Gidra gets out of control.
Yeah, then it gets to his head.
Then he likes it.
It's one of those things of I wish I had known more. That was a thing that I was hearing about for years, that there was this Asian American.
I would have read it.
It was great.
Yeah. I would have read it just for the covers. There's so few sort of local independent things like that now. I don't even know if LA Weekly exists anymore.
I'm not quite sure.
We are the champion of that battle, but if it were sitting at some coffee shop or something, I'd pick one up.
There should be a more comprehensive, because a lot of it's digitized online, which is great for researchers, but I don't like
reading newspapers and magazines online.
No, it's like a carpool lane to a headache, the fastest way.
All right, so now for our last portion here. I have another person. This is not a monster from a Godzilla movie, although maybe she would have liked that. This is one, like I said, we gave her about a paragraph before as part of a bigger episode, but her whole story is worth telling.
And I know that she has a huge story, especially in LA, because she's hometown hero.
Yet again.
Just
like Gidra. So, Anna May Wong, but Anna May also become a big Hollywood star. This is the story of a lady who we covered, like I said, only in passing as part of the larger Chinatown episode, but it's time to revisit and give her full due. Anna May Wong, which I guess I pronounce her name too fast because both you and Melissa were like, she's not anime.
Yeah, anime.
Anna May Wong. I'm not going to enunciate an A to an M sound. Anna May Wong.
Were we talking about the lamb sandwich story in regards to this? Or was that a different reason that was brought up?
Let's quickly tell that story.
When I tell people, I realize it's a not story. It's not climactic. It's barely funny except for me, you, and Edric.
It's not climactic because I was so enunciatory about this, because we went to the Bear Pit barbecue.
Yeah.
I don't eat pork, so I wanted to get a lamb sandwich, but I didn't want them to think I'm ordering a ham sandwich. So when the lady came up to me and said, "What do you want?" I said, "I'd like a lamb sandwich."
And you said it like every time you come, they get it wrong. You had the tone of a man who's fed up. Give me a lamb sandwich. And I thought you were mad at her.
A lamb, ba, not oink, oink. Yeah, I don't know why I brought that up to you the other day.
Yeah, you brought it up. I had brought it up to Ada not too long ago, too. So it was so funny that both of us had found a way to bring up a nothing story. But you're doing the same thing where you're like, Anna May Wong.
I'm still going to sound like I'm saying it anime, but I'm saying Anna May. So she was born January 3rd, 1905 in our very own Chinatown, Los Angeles.
Yes.
As her name originally was Wong Helen Liu Fong, which is interesting because this is two people with the name Liu in their name.
Yeah.
So anyway, interesting to me.
That's fun.
So her name meant frosted yellow willows in Chinese.
Beautiful.
Her family had been in the country for a while by the time she was born, and they had the full Chinese American experience of the 1800s, which is not an experience I've drive downtown and pay $50 for.
Not recommended.
No, not fun for many. Her grandpa came to the country in the 1850s, as many Chinese people did, for the gold rush.
Okay.
He had a son. He was living in Sacramento, so he had a son, but shortly after the son was born, a woman fell down a well, and the dad tried to save her, and he ended up dying trying to save this woman from a well, which is crazy. No good deed goes without falling into a well. So now the son, who's Anna May's dad, and his mom, they moved back to China where the son grew up, and he married a woman who had also been born in California but had moved back to China, and then they themselves had a son. So Anna May's dad then decided that he wanted to give America another try, so he went back to California alone with the intention of making some money and then sending for his wife and son. Problem was, the U.S. extended the restrictions on the Chinese Exclusion Act, and now wives were not allowed into the United States from China, so he had to just forget about his wife in China and pretend like they were never married, even though he had a son and a wife.
Wild.
That's insane that the U.S. government just told him, like, your wife is gone now.
You're single now.
Yeah, the true American dad experience. His mom then arranged for a new marriage for him to another Chinese woman who was born in San Francisco, and this woman was Anna May Wong's mom.
Okay.
So these are her parents.
Right.
The two then moved to Los Angeles, where they opened, once again, a laundromat on Figueroa, and they lived in an apartment above it. Her parents had 8 kids, but one of them died young, and one of these kids was Liu Song, who was born somewhere on Flower Street downtown. As a kid, she, of course, helped out in the laundromat. I don't know if she was ironing socks, but I don't know if she got punished like that. And she would deliver laundry, and she also went to the California Street Elementary School and took Chinese lessons after class. The problem was, this was early 1900s Los Angeles, and she was Chinese. So she went by her English name, Anna May, when she was at school, but that didn't stop the white kids from pushing her, slapping her, and the schoolyard experience wouldn't be complete without racist name calling.
You're right.
So she was just picked on constantly. I would say that's more than being picked on, but
yeah, no, that's
she was hate
traumatic
crime.
racial abuse. Yeah.
She was traumatized in a very cruel way on a daily basis. So it got to be too much for her. So her parents transferred her to the China Mission School in Chinatown, where all the other kids were Chinese, and she had a much better time. But her true interest was not found in the classroom, unless it was a rainy day and it was time to watch The Sandlot again. No, what she really loved was movies.
Don't we all, Anna May?
Don't we all love Anna May? She loved movies. She would ditch school and take her lunch money and the tips she got delivering laundry and sneak into theaters and watch movies while she was supposed to be in class. Then she'd roam around town trying to find film crews shooting something outside, and she'd just stand there and watch them for hours trying to get as close to the action as she could.
Which should be the experience. If you see someone shooting a movie, you should be like, oh, cool, I want to see how it's done. It should be like, oh.
Yeah. Well, this was, 1915 maybe? This was like the 4th movie film.
It literally all Keystone Cops.
Yeah, she hadn't been stuck in traffic for the 4,000th time because of a movie being filmed. But yeah, she just loved watching it. Yeah. She was around film crews so often. I remember we talked about this in the episode. She was around them so often that people started recognizing her and would call her CCC for Curious Chinese Child. I don't know why that stuck in my head for like the past 6 years since we
You like wordplay so much.
It's just so alliterative, Greg. How could I forget such alliteration? But this is also weird that like at the same time, probably Sister Corita was like wandering around watching movies being filmed, and she's standing next to Anna May Wong and Tex Avery or whoever we talked about. Chuck Jones. 3 of us should collaborate
on a project together.
So then she would go home and she would reenact scenes that she saw in front of a mirror to get the facial expressions right. And by age 9,
she was that close to be seeing like actors perform, because usually,
well, she was also, first of all, but she was also watching movies.
Watching movies.
So she could, the revelation to me was like, oh yeah, she wouldn't be saying lines. If you're reenacting a scene from a silent movie, you're just going like, so her mom's pounding on the bathroom door. What are you doing in there? It's silent. Keep it up in there.
Yeah. You're not hemming for the mirror, are you?
You're not mugging, are you? So at age 9, she had already decided that she wanted to become an actress at age 9. She even decided at age 11 what her stage name would be. It would be the combination of both her English and her Chinese names, Anna May Wong.
Perfect.
The lamb sandwich of people. But this is not something a 9, 10, or 11-year-old Chinese-American girl admits to her parents in 1915.
Obviously, yeah.
First off, what parents in any year would want their kid to become an actor. Second, at the time, the idea of an Asian actor that had more than a role in a movie that was just someone pushing a cart in the background was almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Then third, she was 11 years old.
Most important.
Yeah, third, she was in third grade. Why would her parents let her do that? So as it was, she started trying to get into acting and did the only relatable thing to do in that situation and never told her parents.
Mm-hmm. Incredibly relatable.
It's the only way to do it. So,
you told your parents early on? Yeah, that's a big mistake, huh?
Ooh, you'll never make it.
Ooh, yeah. That's not in the David Letterman book. That's not in the Steve Martin book.
That's not a good hook for your resume. She was smart about this, Anna May Wong. She was 11 years old and she knew that she was young. So she gave herself 10 years. And if she wasn't a successful actor within 10 years, she was going to quit, and it wouldn't be that bad because she would only be 21 years old and she could still go and do anything else.
And that's the benefit of knowing really young what you want to do.
Yeah, she had a serious self-awareness. Luckily for her, it didn't take 10 years. Must be nice. I heard a couple stories that either it was because she was hanging around movie sets so much, or her cousin or her uncle.
She became like assistant gaffer, for no experience.
Like Steven Spielberg, she just snuck on and started working. Who's this curious baseball hat wearing child? That's Steven Spielberg's nickname. It was either her cousin or her uncle. It was a guy named James Wang who had played the Chinese character in several westerns. Whoever he was and whatever the situation exactly was, she was made aware that a movie was putting out a casting call for 300 Chinese women and girls to be extras, and she was chosen as one of them.
Cool.
This was her first time on screen. It was 1919's The Red Lantern, which had Reginald Denny in it.
Did it really?
Yeah.
The actor with the strangest name.
With the most unfortunate name. So she was 14 years old and carried a lantern in the background. Was it the titular Red Lantern? Who knows? Color wasn't invented yet in movies.
It's a darker gray.
How come that lantern is so toned? She did this sort of background work for 2 years, 2 full years, without telling her parents. Lightweight. So when she was 16, her dad got her a job as a secretary in some office, thinking my daughter needs a job.
Yeah.
She got fired after a week, but the story I heard, that same day she got fired, she was dreading coming home to tell her dad that I lost the job you got me. That same day, a letter arrived for her before she got home, offering her a role in the movie Bits of Life, and her dad read it, and suddenly she had a lot of splaining to do. This is always, lying to your parents, always blown up by someone who's trying to help you out. It's always them. Luckily, though, her parents finding out she was doing this overshadowed that she just got fired from her job.
Yeah. You're going to have to quit your job. Okay.
About that. Oh, you're still going to be a secretary.
Yeah.
Even though her parents saw becoming an actress on par with becoming a sex worker, they agreed to allow her to keep acting, which was great because this was going to be her first actual screen credit in Bits of Life.
And that must have been seen past it being a bad career to the point where that's a great opportunity.
Well, listen to what the opportunity was. This was 1921, and this was when she dropped out of Los Angeles High School to pursue acting full time. This movie was a big deal because her role was she was the abused wife of the main character, who was played by Lon Chaney.
She was in a Lon Chaney
She was in
movie.
The Man of 1,000 Faces. Unfortunately, this time it was a Chinese face, and he was regrettably in yellow face, which is a term I don't like using because yellow is a weird way to describe non-Simpsons people skin color. But for some reason, it's the accepted terminology. But let the record show, I didn't like saying yellow face.
Yeah, it's awful.
Also, unlike blackface, which, okay, I get it. They put black paint on their face. With yellowface, they never actually painted anybody's skin yellow. It just meant they would use tape or spirit gum to pull their eyes up and back, which is just as gross. But she was in a Lon Chaney movie. That's insane. And I think it's also one of those Lon Chaney movies where there's no footage remaining. I think
one of those.
I think there's some pictures of it maybe. So this was her first real movie role, but the conditions her dad agreed with her to let her act in it was that she always had to have an adult escort on set with her, who was usually him. And when she wasn't on camera, he would keep her locked in a room on set so nobody would go near her.
Oh my God.
Hooray for Hollywood.
These sounds like you're describing Brooke Shields too. And also a third thing is I get as many autographs as I want. No questions asked. And also if I go eat from the...
Yeah, I'll be at craft services while you're locked in the room.
Also, if you could introduce me to Gloria Swanson, that's in our contract. So I'll let you go ahead and work that out.
So this led to her getting her very first lead role just 1 year later at age 17 in The Toll Soul of the Sea in 1922. This was a huge deal for her, but also a huge deal for movie history because this movie seems to have been the first Technicolor feature-length movie ever made, and also the first one to not require a special projector to screen it.
Whoa,
So
really?
she was the lead character in this. But now Anna May Wong, she's something of a starlet. She's 17 years old and she's a star now. And her dad still kept her locked in a broom closet on the set. Reporters started hanging around her family's laundromat hoping to see her and get a picture or something. One fan in particular of her was husband of the guardian angel of L.A. Meekley, Douglas Fairbanks. Let's just do the math there. That's Mary Pickford's husband. So Douglas Fairbanks, he loved The Toll of the Sea so much that he cast her in the next movie he was doing, The Thief of Baghdad, in 1924. And this was massive for her. It was like being cast in The Avengers. Like, that's how big of a deal it would be.
You know how big of a deal it is? I've heard of that movie.
That movie's 100 years old, and I know what it is.
I know exactly what it is.
So it wasn't a big role, but it was a mega Hollywood production, and she got huge exposure from being in it. Almost as importantly here, though, was that she was hugely exposed in the movie. Her outfit was risque to the extreme for 1924. The best description I have is think Leia in Return of the Jedi.
Okay.
Like, that's basically how she was dressed.
Okay.
And even though her acting was also as good as it could be for such a small role, it made a big splash with the public.
I'm sure.
Yeah, they had never seen skin before. Her parents, not so much. They did not like this. They had to give their permission to let her wear that in the movie, but they were very embarrassed by it and kind of alienated her from some of her siblings. This was it, though, for Anna May Wong. She had broken through, and now she was a bona fide movie star.
Yeah.
More importantly, she was the first bona fide Asian American movie star, Anna May Wong. She was put in many movies. Sometimes, since she was not white, they'd make her play whatever non-white characters that were in the movie, be it Latina or Native American. She was Tiger Lily in Peter Pan in 1924.
We're talking about a different Peter Pan.
What Peter Pan are you thinking of? Hook?
The Disney one.
Yeah, she was in Disney's Peter Pan.
I was like, wait.
They animated
she did
her.
the voice for Tiger Lily, who
She
doesn't
finally
talk?
became animated. Well, yeah, guess what? 1924, she also didn't talk. It's a silent movie. She was always getting standout reviews, even when the movie itself was bad. Her fans called her the Yellow Wonder. White audiences loved her because she was different and exotic. Asian American audiences loved her because she was an Asian presence on screen. So everybody was into her. Douglas Fairbanks maybe a little too much. She drilled the first rivet into the foundations of the Chinese theater in a big special ceremony.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, who else would they...
That's very true.
Who else?
We're going to get Mickey Rooney to do it.
Could we get Lon Chaney to do that one face again? She dressed as a flapper. Her bangs were iconic. She knew slang. She could do the Charleston, which right there, that's a movie star to me. So she was hip, which is not a word people use to describe me when I tell them I can also do the Charleston. Well, listen to my slang. Chuck. She was also a model. She would sometimes model fur in ads that were in the paper, and her parents seemed to have come around on all this and were now proud of her for everything she was doing.
That reminds me of Conan talks about getting his first job and how disappointed his parents were in him pursuing comedy until he brought the first paycheck home. They're like, okay, you're fine.
So one time her dad was so proud that he clipped one of her fur ads out of the newspaper and sent it to his son, Anna May's half-brother or stepbrother, whatever you call it.
Half-brother, I think.
Back in China, and he replied, "Song is indeed very beautiful, but please send me the dollar watch printed on the other side." Such a half-brother response.
Yeah.
That's so...
We love the clipping so much we framed it, but it's the backside of it.
Yeah, she looks really good, but 35 cents for a can of beans? What?
America really is great.
Too bad we weren't allowed to come. And during all this, she would still keep the books at her parents' laundry. Like, she was still working at her parents' laundry place.
Imagine that, like, one of the biggest movie stars, and she still, like, has to do a shift at the laundromat.
On Friday night, she puts on a visor, and she's, like, crunching the numbers in her dad's back room. But, of course, it wasn't all roses for old Frosted Yellow Willows. She was a movie star, yes, but she was also a Chinese woman working in a white man's industry. And this was one of the many eras of yellow peril, the term that history has given to the situation she faced, and still Asian actors are still facing today.
Yeah.
What they call this is the bamboo ceiling. In her time, the two roles an Asian woman could play would either be the butterfly, who was submissive and subservient, so that you were either the butterfly or you were the dragon lady, who was the seductive villain.
Okay.
And the role she was offered would not go any higher than those before she hit the bamboo ceiling. So that's all she could play.
That's so, like, it's a weird way to connect it, but like in film noir, you're either like the girl who's like fighting someone with her wrist, or you're the femme fatale, but there's little room for...
Yeah, it's hard enough to write things. Do you think I'm going to take the time to flesh out the female characters?
So rub William Faulkner to write another thing? No, you do it as is.
So in Anna May's case, because she was so beautiful and had such a striking figure, she was also highly sexualized in everything, which was par for the course of America's obsession with objectifying Asian women as these exotic beings for sexual conquest. But there was this ridiculous contradiction here because certain states in the country at the time had laws forbidding interracial couples. So to avoid controversy with those laws and to make sure their movies could be shown in as many states as possible, the movie studios just self-censored themselves and chose not to portray interracial couples on screen.
Because that was part of the Hays Code too, I think. Was there no interracial couples allowed in any film?
It's weird because like you could have two white people pretending to be Asian kiss each other, but you couldn't have a white man pretending to be Asian kiss an Asian woman.
Yeah. It's almost like it's really racist.
Oh, that's the word I'm looking for. That's what I was trying to put my finger on it. And this is also why they wouldn't put Anna May in many lead roles, because by the laws of early Hollywood storytelling, the leading woman would have to kiss the leading man at some point.
Every story literally had a man kiss a woman in it.
Yeah, it had to be.
The hero, that's how you know the hero is good, is they kissed a woman.
Whether she wanted it or not. And since there were only white leading men, they couldn't have an Asian leading woman. And no way could they have an Asian leading man, because that would be crazy.
What kind of story is that?
How am I going to write that?
Yeah.
So to sum up, whenever she was on screen during this time, she was typically some evil sex kitten in a pretty minor role and would usually be killed before the movie ended because she was evil. And to top it all off, she was getting paid significantly less than her white co-stars. But luckily for all of us, she was not content with this. She hated that the roles she was offered were always villains. She said, "And so cruel a villain, murderous, treacherous, a snake in the grass. How should we be with a civilization that's so many times older than that of the West? We have our own virtues. We have our rigid code of behavior, of honor. Why do they never show these on screen? Why should we always scheme, rob, and kill?" Yeah. So fed up with the racist roles Hollywood is providing to Asian actors, she decided to open up her own production company, Anna May Wong Productions, in March 1924. And her plan was to make movies about Chinese legends and Chinese people, with Chinese people working on them and acting in them.
How incredibly progressive that would have been.
But of course, her partner was a guy named Forrest B. Crichton, but Forrest B. a crook, because he just stole her money and the whole thing crumbled, and she never got to make anything. Yeah. Shocking for the guy named after the founder of the KKK. Yeah, that would have been, imagine, like the Lincoln Picture Company with black actors. Like that would have been, imagine what the world could have been like. And all it took was one crook stealing her money
to undo everything.
So she was stuck back trying to cope with the structural racism in place in Hollywood. She did what she could. She spoke out against Hollywood racism in interviews, and she stood up for herself when she could. She tried to work with the makeup and costume people to make sure that she looked more authentic on screen. Part of the reason she had adopted that flapper style, though, is because she wanted to show the public that she wasn't different than anybody else.
Right.
She was just another independent American woman. But just like Hattie McDaniel in Step and Fetch It, it was this or nothing. Like she tried, and she could have put her foot down and said no, but then guess what? You're not going to be paid.
Yeah.
Like she needed to make money, and like you can't fault her for playing the roles that she was playing.
I fault the system. I don't fault the actors having to try to push through all that.
Don't hate the player. Hate famous players Lasky. She even had to teach Myrna Loy how to use chopsticks on the set of The Crimson City in 1928, because Myrna Loy was playing the lead Asian role, while Anna May, professional Asian movie star and chopstick user,
professional Asian woman
at large, she was stuck as yet another side character.
God, that's awful.
So then there was a photo story in Photoplay magazine of Loretta Young in full-on yellowface saying, "You didn't even need to cast Anna May Wong because Loretta Young could play an Asian person better." So there was like this
I'm
weird...
gonna get a nosebleed rolling my eyes so hard.
There's just like this weird smear campaign. I don't know what they were trying to prove. And on top of all of this, the FBI had a file on her because they kept tabs on Asian people, and she was the most prominent Asian person in the country.
I bet that was the first one on the list. Like, okay, let's name all the Asian people.
Yeah.
Okay, Anna May Wong.
Anna May Wong.
And,
oh boy.
Okay.
We're not racist, are we? We're the good guys, right? So in 1928, she said, "Forget all this. I don't need to deal with any of this." And she moved to Europe, where they were a little more accepting of someone like her. A little.
3% to 5%.
Yeah. She was welcomed in the European movie industry because she was such a big star in America, and she was able to get juicier leading roles, but most of the time they were still falling into those same stereotypes. She was making movies in London, Berlin, Paris. She was in Germany's first talkie ever.
wow, really?
Anna May Wong. And to be in these movies, this little girl from Chinatown was in Germany's first talking picture. And to be in these movies, she also had to learn the languages. So she became at least proficient in French, German, and Italian on top of English and either Mandarin or Cantonese.
Yeah.
For one movie called Flame of Love, she made 3 full versions of it, one entirely in English, one entirely in French, and one entirely in German. I think all the other actors around her were like, all right, bring in the French crew.
Yeah, but she
was in it
wow.
speaking those languages for the whole movie. She also became friends with the European actors like Marlene Dietrich, who she is rumored to have been romantically involved with.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
Good for both of them.
Well done.
Well done, both of you. What a perfect 10 out of 10
home run for
relationship.
both of you. She was also rumored to have been romantically involved with Dracula director Todd Browning when she was 17, to which I say,
geez.
bleh.
That's exactly like Todd Browning. Everything I know about Todd Browning, boy raised in the circus, that sounds like something
Yeah.
you would do. Can you read the first part of the sentence and I'll tell you where to stop?
She was also rumored to have been romantically involved with Dracula
Stop.
director.
Go back a word? Okay.
There's rumor of this affair she had with this sort of king of the night, this prince of darkness who...
He's a count, so he's certainly royalty from a made-up country.
I hear he did move to England, though. There's also a picture of her in 1929, Anna May Wong with Marlene Dietrich and another German actress who would go on to become a director, Leni Riefenstahl, director of Triumph of the Will, famous Nazi propaganda movie and friend of Hitler, to which I say, bleh. Imagine how incriminate, like, with your...
That's the poster of you that's hanging in Romanov's?
And it's like weirdly folded at the end. Like, whose arm is that?
Is that an SS
Yeah, what's
cufflinks?
that? What's that skull ring? So she also did a bunch of stage shows as well around Europe. She started an opera in Germany, entirely in German, and she did one play called A Circle of Chalk that was written specifically for her, where her co-star was a young nobody named Sir Lawrence Olivier. He was born with the Sir.
I love when our stories become like
Forrest Gump.
Or like Hollywood 101.
Yeah. One problem people did have with her on stage was her Los Angeles accent. One quote
Like
about...
a Valley Girl?
That's what it kind of sounds like. One quote about her on stage in Britain was, they said, she has the world's most beautiful figure and a face like a Ming princess. And when she opens her mouth, out comes Los Angeles Chinatown Sing Sing Girl, and every syllable is a fresh shock. Like, I don't know what she sound like. I don't know what the LA Chinatown accent was.
I'm offended.
It's pretty offensive. I can't, is it like, oh my God. I don't know what people in 1920s...
Yeah, I'm so curious now.
Yeah. She took vocal coaching, though, to crush out her LA accent.
Yeah.
But you can't crush the girl out of LA, because in May 1931, Paramount contracted her, promising her leading roles in a 3-picture deal.
Wow. She replaced her LA accent with a Boston accent? Go ahead.
This is the only thing powerful enough.
Pack the car, pack.
Oh my God, pack the cat. So Paramount Pictures, 3-picture deal, leading roles, and to sweeten the pot, they also promised she wouldn't get a pay increase. But
The best deal you've ever heard of.
yeah, we lost all the stuff you wanted, but we kept all the bad things. But she wanted to give Hollywood another shot, and also her mom got hit and killed by a car in front of their house.
God.
So she figured maybe it's time to come home. And wouldn't you believe it? This time Hollywood learned its lesson and gave her everything she deserved. Just kidding. They still took advantage of her. She played the daughter of Fu Manchu in Daughter of the Dragon, which was her first American talkie, and she was top billed in the movie. And Warner Oland, who was the guy who played Fu Manchu and was barely in this movie, he got paid $12,000, while Anna May Wong got $6,000, top billed. She is the daughter of the dragon, and she got $6,000. She was in Shanghai Express with her old pal, Marlene Dietrich, and while Dietrich was very much the star of the movie, Marlene Dietrich got $78,166, while Anna May Wong got $6,000.
And a pat on the back. Well, she got a flat rate?
And a rock.
That's crazy. That's absurd. I
It
hate
is
that.
like Anna May Wong didn't have the biggest part in the movie, but it's Anna May Wong.
Yeah, it's a person to be billed.
Yeah, exactly. Like if Warner Oland can be paid $12,000 to die as Fu Manchu in the first 5 minutes, like you can pay for the name recognition of Anna May Wong. Plus, Anna May Wong got better reviews than Dietrich, so Dietrich complained years later that Wong upstaged her.
My old girlfriend, friend,
I mean, did you hear she's dating Dracula? I'm straight as an arrow. I'm straight as a googie roof. In her personal life as well, it was another Hattie McDaniel situation where she's one of the biggest names in Hollywood, and yet she wasn't allowed to live in most parts around town.
Right.
But at the same time, like I said, she was one of the biggest names in Hollywood and an icon. The Mayfair Mannequin Society of New York named her the world's best dressed woman. Look magazine named her the world's most beautiful Chinese girl. Weird side note, in 1937, both she and David Selznick got letters in the mail from some lunatic. Selznick said that he had to make a biblical movie starring Anna May Wong, and hers said that if she didn't send him $20,000, he'd dismember her.
Oh, those are very different letters. I thought the other one was going to be like, you better star in this movie.
Also with contradictory, I'm going to
so
dismember you, and then you better star in this movie. The movie never got made. The guy never got caught, and Anna May Wong was never dismembered. So the public loved her, aside from Mr. Dismemberment, and Hollywood also loved her, but it was illegal for her to live in Beverly Hills, and she just could not break through that bamboo ceiling in her movie role. So it was really confusing and can mess with your head, which it did. Anna May Wong started struggling with depression, and she also became an alcoholic. So she was not coping with it very well.
We love you in theory.
Yeah, we love you as an actor.
As an image.
Yeah, we love you when you're in the movie theater, and then we leave you, and you don't live on my blog.
And you're like, do you validate? And we're like, oh boy, this became really real right now, and I'm kind of not feeling you anymore.
What a crazy thing of people like, no, I don't want Hattie McDaniel and Anna May Wong, world-renowned movie stars living on my street.
What would that mean about my street?
What'll it do for the property value? Make it go up?
Because two giant movie stars live on my street?
But the biggest insult came when she... this is crazy. It came when she found out they were making a movie version of The Good Earth by Pearl S. Buck in 1937.
We talked about that in the Chinatown episode.
Did we?
Yeah.
The book had been a huge hit when it came out in 1931 and is now a classic about a Chinese farmer in early 1900s China. It's a story entirely about Chinese people, so Anna May Wong correctly, might I add, figured that the farmer's wife, Olan, was the role she was born to play.
Right.
The producers felt differently. One guy said she wasn't beautiful enough, and somebody said she was too Chinese to play Chinese. I don't know what that means.
Okay, go ahead.
So the role went to Louise Rayner, who was put in Yellowface, and she won an Oscar for that role. The movie, all about Chinese people, ended up starring two white people. As a consolation, the producers offered her the role of Lotus, which was the one evil character in the story. And she said, you're asking me, with Chinese blood, to do the only unsympathetic role in the picture featuring an all-American cast portraying Chinese actors. And to which they said, yeah, why are you using that tone? So she refused, and once...
It's not an all-American cast. That guy's German. Go ahead.
So she refused, and once again, she quit Hollywood for the second time. Her younger sister actually did get a small role in the movie, and just 3 years later, hanged herself in the family garage. Another weird side note.
Wow.
So now Anna May is done with Hollywood again, and decides to reconnect with her roots and go on a grand tour of China. I'm going to go to the homeland. I'm going to see what it's like. She traveled all around seeing sights, buying clothes that she could use in movies and on stage, and she also documented everything she did as a travel log that she was mailing back to the New York Herald Tribune and the LA Times to publish, like Anna May Wong travels in China, like Charles Lummis.
Yeah.
But what she found in China was kind of disturbing. It turns out the press and overall population in China hated Anna May Wong.
Oh, geez.
They called her the female traitor to China, partly because she was a Chinese woman and being a sexual character like she was in most movies was a big no-no for Chinese women in China, but also partly because her roles were not exactly flattering to Chinese people. So she was sort of like how people saw Step and Fetch It, like you are a traitor to our kind. So now she was being rejected by certain parts of America for being too Chinese, and also certain parts of China for being too American.
Right.
So this was definitely not good for her depression and her alcoholism. After China, she spent about 3 years back in Europe doing movies and theater, and then World War II hit, and show business had to be melted down into bullets. Anna May Wong had always been involved in fighting for Chinese rights. As far back as 1931, she wrote a whole criticism of Japan's invasion of Manchuria. But when the war hit, and with all she was going through in her struggle within herself, she decided to devote all of her time to Chinese and Asian causes. She raised money for Chinese refugees from Japan. She auctioned off her movie costumes and gave the money to different Chinese charities. She wrote a cookbook, gave the proceeds from that as well to charity. She did fundraisers in Australia. Wow. She toured with the USO. She worked for the United China Relief Fund. She worked with groups in Chinatown here in Los Angeles to repeal the Chinese Exclusion Act. And this was much more fulfilling to her than playing a conniving sex worker who's trying to kill white people in a movie.
Yeah, the owner and operator of Opium Den.
Exactly.
Not as appealing as actually...
You want to be a drug dealer or try to get the Chinese Exclusion Act repealed?
We can chain you to the wall, like a decoration.
We won't pay you.
Yeah.
If that's what you're worried about.
If you're worried about paperwork, don't worry, we're not going to pay you.
And plus, the 1940s wasn't exactly a time for sympathetic portrayals of Asian people of any kind in movies. Ooh. So in 1942, she just decided to retire from acting altogether. She was 35 years old.
Good for her.
Good for her, which also, boy, retiring
Get
at
away
35.
From him. Leave him.
Get away. Leave him, Mr. Hollywood. And that was just her whole life for 7 years when she decided she wanted to. For 7 years, she was just like fundraising, activism stuff, and just like living. But then 7 years later, she decided she wanted to give acting another try.
What year was it?
1949, she wanted to get back into acting. Not much really came out of this career revival. Not much had really changed in Hollywood. Also, she now flat out refused to do the sort of things she was usually asked to do. Yeah. She would not play a racist role anymore. So she was mostly in TV shows and low-budget B stuff where she actually could find a few roles that were well-written, non-stereotypical Asian characters. Yeah. The biggest part of this phase of her career, though, was in 1951. She became the star of The Gallery of Madame Liu Song, where she played an art gallery owner / detective.
I love that.
This was a TV show, which sounds great. It was on the Dumont Network, which was an early rival to NBC and CBS, and it only had one season, but this was the first American TV show to have a lead actor who was Asian American.
I love that.
And it was Anna May Wong. And that sounds great.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if there's, because like what's left from the Dumont Network? Like I don't think there's any DVD sets of this show. But in 1961, it looked like a career revival actually was coming. They were planning to make a movie out of the Broadway musical Flower Drum Song. It was a big hit musical. This was going to be a huge movie. It was a story mostly about Asian Americans, and it was going to be played mostly by Asian Americans. And once again, Anna May Wong felt she was perfect for the role of the mom, and this time producers actually agreed and cast her in the role. This maybe could be the first step towards a new phase of her career where she could actually play fully fleshed out Asian characters on screen. Yeah. And then she died of a heart attack at her house in Santa Monica before the filming could start. She was 56 years old. She had been in over 50 movies. She had a star on the Walk of Fame, and years later, she got that statue at the end of Hollywood Boulevard with a few other women trailblazers. It's also said that the song These Foolish Things was written about her in 1935, which could be true because she was friends with the guy who wrote it. But as one last insult, her obituary in Time magazine said that she had died 1,000 deaths as the screen's foremost Oriental villain. So you never could shake that stereotype. And by dying 1,000 deaths, they meant because she was always the villain. She always died in the end. But in reality, she did die 1,000 deaths every time she had to play one of those roles because it killed her a little bit inside. She didn't want to do that. So here's to remembering Anna May Wong. Hollywood didn't know what they had when they had her, but her half-brother would still prefer that dollar watch on the other side of the picture. A perfect metaphor for her.
What an absolutely tragic story that
is. It is tragic. Like she wasn't old. She wasn't that old, and she was cast in the role. She was going to be in a juicy role. She probably could have done other stuff, but
Hollywood's trying to play catch up now. I mean, like, look how progressive we are. Like, you had so many chances, and you've buried so many people.
That's why, like I said, they didn't know what they had. You had a top-notch actress that you could have used, and you didn't.
You could have been planting the seeds for what you're doing now years ago, and you just flat out refused.
Much like the farmer from the good earth. So yeah, that's Anna May Wong. She's really cool style in all the old pictures you see of her. Like
she's always the best dressed.
But then again, like there's so much more to her than just that. Before we sum up, we have our listener question.
Oh, we didn't do that.
Yeah, we didn't do it. We put it at the end, tucked it away at the end. This one is from Emilio What's the Dealio on Instagram.
Our third host.
Our third
ghost host.
He's the Helen Liu Fong of our Arme and Davis. So his question is, what are the best shows about LA?
This was a hard one.
This was hard. When he first said this, I thought easy peasy. But yeah, the second I thought about it, like I don't know.
A part of me was like, oh, Arrested Development. Well, that's more Orange County. And
it's famously Orange County.
Famously Orange County.
You mentioned Curb Your Enthusiasm, which is I think is a great one. It shows such a idealized, like what I would love my life in Los Angeles to be like, the idle rich, but it has such a great Los Angeles feel.
There is really something. I think when you're on that tier that Larry David is, you just keep running into people, famous people, and then just like you fight with valet people.
Yeah, as you're going to eat out 3 meals a day in restaurants. Did you come up with some more?
Mine are not, like Curb was my best one because that's the one that I'm probably like is passionate about LA. I haven't seen all of Dragnet, but Old Dragnet was a lot of old LA stuff.
Well, there's also like Emergency and Adam 12. Like those are all of
Chips. Can't do Chips anywhere else.
California's pretty big. It's not Lapes. It's Chips.
The I Love Lucy season where they come to Hollywood is some of the best Hollywood TV, even though a lot of it
it's
was
not a season though. That was like 3 episodes.
No, I think it's like 6 episodes, but fair. It's not. It's the Brady Bunch is quintessential Southern California, I think.
Right.
And let's not forget the friggin' Beverly Hillbillies.
Lest we forget.
One of the funniest shows.
We would be remiss to not mention.
It's about a family that moves from Palmdale to Beverly Hills.
My other ones I have Mr. Mayor. I think you should watch that. It's not really about it, but it's like a cartoon version of LA almost, which is good. And also I really like that show. Barry.
Oh, okay.
Barry is very, very LA.
Barry is Barry LA.
Oh, Greg, I saw what you did.
Yeah.
It's very good too. Like there's a character named NoHo Hank, so it's very much infused with the Valley and Hollywood. Malcolm in the Middle.
Oh, you're right.
Which is not explicitly Los Angeles, but it is filmed all over LA, and it looks and feels a lot like LA.
Yeah.
This is a stretch, but Zorro.
Okay.
The Zorro TV show, because it all takes place in Los Angeles, a fake Los Angeles of 200 years ago, but Los Angeles nonetheless.
That's a great one.
And then, like that and the Lone Ranger and things that are all over the hills of Chatsworth and stuff. Here's a really weird specific thing that I thought of, though. When I'm watching like MeTV or something like that, I like at the end of old shows, I'm watching them late at night, I'm watching like
Adam's Batman
or Lost in Space or something like that. And at the end of these shows from the 50s and 60s, after the credits, it's like a thing that says filmed in Studio City or filmed at Television City in Hollywood. I love that.
Me too, yeah.
I love knowing that it's like, oh, it's right down the road.
Filmed in front of a live studio audience in Los Angeles, California. Or whatever. You're right. I love those. Adam West Batman is another one where it's like, I think I know where that's at.
I think I can find the Batmobile. Hey, if you have a listener question for us, you can, please, we need more. Send us an email, la.meekly@gmail.com, or message us on Instagram, la_meekly. Also follow us on Instagram or Twitter at @LAMeekly.
Right.
Those are the best ways to send your emails and messages, but also subscribe to us on YouTube. We're trying to get more subscribers on there. We have all of the episodes segmented up. If you want to hear just like, oh, I want to hear the thing about Googie.
Yeah.
I want to hear the thing about Chinatown. You can go back to that. And we have some video content.
And there should be more.
Very, very some.
Yeah.
Subscribe to us on Patreon.
Right.
We are an independently made podcast, and we would depend on people like you to keep us going, because we may or may not have had an ad in the middle of this episode.
Maybe we just stop talking for 2 minutes and just let air seep into the microphone.
That's air. That's worth some good money, that dead air we let die.
For those who don't know, for $5 a month on our Patreon, we will send you a handwritten postcard
every single month.
Every single month.
At less than $5, you can just support us, and we will also say your name on the show.
That's right.
So yeah, this has been our Asian American Pride episode. And yeah, I know this isn't the case. There's racism against everybody happening at all times, but I felt like a few months ago, all of the racist people hate black people. Yeah. And then it switched to all the racist people hate Asian people.
Yeah, and there were a lot of attacks happening.
And then like first they came for black people. First they came what's like next? Maybe they'll come for Jewish people again. How many?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah, and if there's not a unity against these racists,
let's all stick together.
Yeah,
and also these people are not the majority. These bad people are not winning.
Yeah, they're just louder than most people. That's all.
Let's all be in this together. Wah, wah, wah. But yeah, hey,
great job.
And now for the ceremonial praising of each other for the work we did in this. Have a good May, everybody. Mother may you all.
And maybe, who knows? Maybe June will be our indoor episode.
Who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows when the next pandemic is going to hit and wipe us all out? Who knows? The shadow knows. Enjoy May. We'll see you in June. And that's been yet another episode of LA Meekly.
Just like Gidra, sometimes the bad guy, sometimes a good guy, since 2013.
Gidra makes my favorite Godzilla kaiju monster noise. They all have their distinct noise. Yeah. Gidra's my favorite.
Is that it? Is that what Gidra sounds like?
He's like, I can't even do it because I'm not an alien from space.
Oh, that's fair. You know what? And that is fair.
You know what? I won't hold you to the fire on that one.